Hello and welcome to another edition of Ask the AD. It's been a while.
It's been a while.
Brian Smoller along with the Director of Athletics, Gene Taylor. A lot's gone on in the last couple of months, not just in the Big 12, but also for K-State Athletics. We had men's basketball search that we were in the midst of during that time. Baseball was wrapping up their season, and summer vacations, all those sorts of things. We get to this point and we thought we'd just do a nice little recap of where things have been sitting, and all of a sudden, it's exploded again. Everything that's happened
yes, it has.
last year. So this is just a warning, kind of letting it out here. Fair disclosure, this is going to be a long episode. All right? So settle in. A lot of good stuff to come.
Strap in, right?
That's right. A lot of good questions. We'll get to those. But let's jump in first with the big topic. And before we get into conference realignment, a new commissioner. And we're going to hear from him here coming up this week. And Bret Mark. Yep. Apologies. But your thoughts on him being the new Big 12 commissioner?
Well, certainly didn't know much about Bret. Obviously, he comes, this is the third commissioner in the Power Five that comes from a non-collegiate background. He was in the professional sports with Rock Nation and was with part of the New Jersey Nets, and his background is very impressive. When you read about him and the things he's accomplished, I've had an opportunity to be on 2 Zoom calls with him, one kind of an introductory call a couple of weeks ago, one last week, just to give us kind of another update of how he's doing. And then I had a personal call with him this past week just to get to know him. I'll serve as the chair of the ADs this year. It kind of rotates. It just happens to be K-State's turn this year. And I've been very impressed with my conversations, or with our conversations with him as ADs. He doesn't, like I said, bring a lot of collegiate background, but he brings a lot of connections in the world of athletics, and impressive connections. And so my first 3 impressions of him have been really, really at a high level. He's come in at a very tumultuous time. I don't think he was expecting that, nor any of us were. But I really like what I see so far. It brings a fresh perspective. Obviously, Bob did a ton for the Big 12. We're going to miss Bob, but I think working with Bret's going to be an exciting time.
He'll have his own chance, as we mentioned, to answer some of those questions about conference realignment here coming up at Big 12 Media Days. But from your perspective, the news comes down about USC and UCLA. Was it oh my goodness, here we go again? Was there a different feeling this time around since it wasn't the Big 12?
Yeah, I would tell you, and I've said this to my colleagues, I've said this to friends. A year ago, I was in a much worse place than I was just a few weeks ago. I did feel for my colleagues in the Pac-12 when they announced USC and UCLA going. I knew what they were going through, that feeling of, oh my goodness, where are we going to be? Where are we going to end up? And we'll see. It's a different time. That was a major move by the Big Ten. Just as Texas and Oklahoma was a major move by the SEC. We were able to come together, and I think we're in a great place with currently 14 members, but soon to be 12. And the 12 we have are a strong group, and we're very committed. We think we're in a position of strength in terms of the Big 12 compared to where we were a year ago. The uncertainty isn't there for us in the Big 12, whether it's the presidents or the ADs, and even with having a new leader in Bret, Commissioner Yormark. But I think we feel a lot differently than we did a year ago. And we are very excited about what the potentials could be for the Big 12. We don't know what those are yet. A lot of things ahead of us, but I think we just feel really positive where we are as a Big 12 right now.
Which is, as you said, a much different feeling than it was a year ago at this time, which helps a lot. And I think there's always that, from a fan perspective, there's always that wish, what can we do? What can we get involved and how can we help? And to kind of sum that up, we have a question here from Twitter we'll throw up as we get through this point, but it comes from @A_Ogilvy, which asks, what does K-State need to do to help ensure long-term relevance with regards to realignment? Of course, around this time, all the rumors start flying on Twitter of this school's being talked about, this school's looking at this conference, and you as a fan, we want our school to be mentioned and talked about with high respect. So what would you respond with that?
Well, I think it's a great question, and I think we have a tremendous brand, and we've had tremendous success, and we have tremendous facilities, and all those things matter. And our ability to be successful and be competitive at a high level, which we can be and we have been and we will be. I think all those things, and then we have a tremendous fan base. We travel well. All those things are recognized. Maybe some people say our brand isn't a USC or UCLA. I would argue that, but certainly our fans care a great deal. And I think just that ability to understand we have to be successful. We'll continue to be successful. Our strong fan base in terms of attendance and when we go to bowl games and we go to in-state tournaments and all those things to conference commissioners and presidents, that's what's important. And I tell you what, that's what will draw, I think, from the Big 12's perspective, because of our fan bases, the interest of maybe teams joining the Big 12. We'll see where that goes, but I will tell you right now that we're in a great place at K-State. I think our brand and our competitiveness is well known nationally, and I think that's where we need to be.
Yeah, really, this region is notorious for the market share. If you look at the Big 12, it is, population-wise, yes, it's not the same as the left and the right coast, but it has a market share, a dominant showing over major metroplexes throughout the entirety of the Midwest, and including Kansas City for K-State.
And I think back to your one point is, I think when you look at who the Big Ten took, they've been uber successful, neither one of those teams, but it's a geographic location of Los Angeles. It's a couple of longtime brands. SEC took Texas and Oklahoma, which are obviously big brands, and we can't dispute that. So I think that's the indication of what these conferences are looking for. We will do the same thing if we have a chance.
All right, so let's talk about TV, because that was a big part of this, right? The Big Ten's about to set all sorts of records with a Big Ten deal that they're hopefully going to announce for this week, and maybe provide a little bit more clarity to the big picture of what's going on. The Big 12 is also on the list of a new TV deal. They're a little bit out. Pac-12 just announced they're pushing theirs up to try and get some numbers. Has the Big 12 done any sort of fact-finding missions with their TV deal?
Well, not yet. Obviously, with the transition of the commissioners, Commissioner Bowlesby took that out about a year ago, and at that time, our TV partners, there was a lot of craziness going on, and they said, we do want to wait. Our deal isn't up until 2026, which everybody knows that. I think with the changes and with the new commissioner, there may be some movement and some discussions with the TV partners. I think you're going to find some interesting things when the Big Ten announces their agreement. With who they're involved with and who's not going to be involved with. There's a lot of interest in live television and live sports. So I think we may move it up. We'll see. I think the Pac-12 did that just to make sure their members were okay, hey, we're still in this together. We'll see how that turns out the next 30 days. But I do think there'll be some more movement or discussion probably behind the scenes as to where our TV partners might be, and maybe having an interest in moving up, or at least have some discussions.
Speaking of moving up, one of the often questions we get from fans about TV is about 11 a.m. kickoffs. And it's a new world. I remember 5-10 years ago, boy, if you got slotted in the 11 o'clock slot, that was the place you did not want to be, right?
Right.
That's not the case anymore.
No, it's not, Brian. And I will tell you, speaking of TV partners, we had some meetings back in May, our annual Big 12 meetings, and our TV partners, both Fox and ESPN, came in, and they gave us the numbers of those 11 o'clock kicks, no matter who was playing in those 11 o'clock kicks. And because they're both coming off, those 11 o'clock kicks come off those big game day shows, whether it's ESPN or Fox, those numbers are probably the most impressive numbers in terms of viewership. People are home, it's the first game of the day, they're watching whatever game day show they watch, whether it's the Fox or ESPN show, then those kicks are usually the most viewed kicks during the day. Obviously the primetime kick as well, but I think from a fan's perspective, we've gotten so used to that, and from a coach's perspective and player's perspective, myself personally, let's get it done at 11, let's get home, watch the rest of football, the players get in, they get out. Coaches love it, but I do think you're gonna see a lot more of your bigger games at 11 o'clock, and I don't think that's a bad thing from a viewer's perspective.
And really for fans that are coming to the game as well, it may mean breakfast tailgates, but it also means a lot of time afterwards to revel in the win and tailgate for hours in the parking lot, right?
Absolutely.
So that's what you can do there. And we'll talk more about fans and attendance here coming up with one of our questions. All right, so let's go back into our fan questions. This one from Twitter comes from @BobTrollsby, nice name, which is, what's the latest on scheduling for 2023? So we talked about the new members coming in. Are we leaning more towards divisions, pods, or protected rivalries?
Another great question, and timely question as well. In the first part of August, we're going to have another meeting of Big 12 ADs, and that's our main topic, is to discuss football scheduling. Are we going to look at divisions? Are we going to go to no divisional play and do whether pods or just figuring out who plays who. We are really looking at protecting the rivalries, and we're certainly, no matter what we do, divisional play or non-divisional play, we are going to protect the rivalries. Obviously, us and KU, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, Texas, those things, Texas Tech and Baylor, whatever those rivalries are, we're definitely going to protect that. But we are kind of back and forth right now. You've seen across the country, some of the big conferences, once that rule changed, some have already changed to non-divisional play. Some have said, well, we're going to go there in 24, 25, whatever. But I think that's going to be a major discussion in August. We have to make that decision in August. So once we decide whether we're going to play divisions or non-divisions, then we'll figure out what the schedule is going to look like. But we're going to focus on 23, 24, 24, 25 because that's 14 teams, and then from there we'll probably reevaluate.
Gotcha. And is there any sense of which way it's leaning? Like, do you have you have preferences, obviously.
Yeah.
Each AD has preference.
Right now we're just, I couldn't tell you if I took a straw poll of the ADs where it would be. There's pros and cons in both, and I think that's what we just have to work through in August.
All right, so we talked about tailgating, and obviously there's a new structure on one side of the parking lot that's going to adjust some of the tailgating that's been pushed out a little farther, but hey, it's still one of the closest walks to stadiums in the Big 12 of anybody in the conference. So the indoor practice facility, you recently updated that is ahead of schedule. We could see it completed by the end of this football season instead of being ready for next year. So it won't necessarily be a factor this year, but once it's done, the new Shamrock practice facility, what are the plans for usage of that on game days?
We're still kind of talking about that, Brian. There's a lot of places around the country that utilize a practice facility, for some sort of fan activity before the game, whether it's a kid zone or whatever. We haven't really decided that. We got, obviously, football is the priority, and how it's utilized is going to be from a football perspective. And obviously other indoor sports obviously soccer could be in there if they need to in bad weather, but from a fan's perspective, we're still working through that, and I think we'll have a lot of time this year once it's done, to just kind of see how the fans, how it plays in terms of operationally on game day. But there might be some opportunities that we want to utilize it from a fan's perspective, but yet it's too early to tell right now, but we're still talking about it.
Good question there from @Doug_Wentz. And we had some others that also asked about Bill Snyder Family Stadium further improvements. And as we wrap up the Building Champions campaign, over $100 million, all sorts of records being set. I don't know how much else is on the docket, but some of the ideas that were thrown out were not bad.
Yeah.
Additional ribbon boards and new seating areas, club areas. What are your thoughts on?
Well, Brian, first of all, I just want to thank our donors. That's a lot of money. And if you look at all of our facilities over the years, we rely on our donors. We don't get state support. It's 100% fundraised with some financing. And once again, they stepped up in a big way to reach $100 million in giving is phenomenal. We set a record year also this year in our Ahern Fund annual giving of over $20 million. So our donors, I can never thank them enough for what all they've done. And as you walk into our beautiful facilities, they're what they do is all over that in terms of their giving and their generosity. Because of that, and because we've relied on those donors, we need to just take a little bit of a break in terms of major projects. There are still some things we're working on, an indoor track and certainly helping with our track program, maybe something for the golf down the road. But we're always looking for things to improve our fan experience. And if there's ways we can improve fan experience with inside Bill Snyder Family Stadium, we'll look at that. And I won't say we're not going to do anything forever, but I think we will take a little bit of a break on major campaigns and major facilities. But those kind of fan experiences we'll continue to look at.
And largely because K-State, thanks to the $100 million plus of the Building Champions, it's now like $300 million worth of facilities here in the last 10 years, which has totally transformed K-State into one of the premier spots as far as facilities.
Absolutely.
In the region and in NCAA. All right, so we go from that to a little bit lighter question, but it's from our good friend @Scott Wildcat. He says, "Hey friends, how are you? Long time no talk." And it's good to hear from you, Scott.
Always good to hear from you, Scott.
Has the official decision on general concession sale of beer, seltzer, and wine been decided for the upcoming football season?
Well, it's going to be what it was last year. So we're going to have it in the two areas, the corners, in the stadium and in the premium areas. But in general, seating will not have alcohol sales. We'll still do the exit and re-entry this year. We'll continue to evaluate it. There was just too many changes in the facility, obviously, with the indoor this year, that we wanted to see how that, again, traffic flowed and how all that affects game operations before we consider any future changes. But we want to kind of settle in where we were this year because of the parking changes, get through that, and then we'll see what happens next year.
All right, and with that, talking about fans coming to games, this question comes from @C_Banning, who asks, how are ticket sales going for football and men's and women's basketball?
Very well. We're very excited about where we are compared to not only last year, but 2019. We always kind of go back to pre-COVID numbers just to give a fair comparison, and we're certainly very excited. Again, I think there's a lot of energy behind not only the football season, but with Coach Tang and Coach Mitty's teams, and so the energy early on in ticket sales are being identified. From a single game perspective, the Missouri game is really a hot ticket item right now. But really, we can't be more excited about where we are on both football and men and women's basketball.
No doubt. Could be a really big year for K-State all the way around. Of course, curiosity to depart with Coach Tang coming in, getting started, Ayoka Lee and the women's basketball poised for a big year. And then, of course, football, hoping for a big showing this season. Going back to what we talked about at the outset about TV, full house never hurts on those television broadcasts. If K-State's winning, you got a full house. It certainly looks good.
Yep.
Here we are. I don't know how many minutes we are in. It's a long one. We could spend another 20 minutes talking about NIL and the transformation committee and some of the rulings there for the transfer portal next time, right? We'll save that for next show.
Yeah, we may have to do a little one sooner. Obviously, there are probably going to be some updates, whether we hear that tomorrow or this week from our new commissioner, and as we may be doing a few of these a little bit sooner, not quite as long a break. But thanks to the fans for being patient. I hope everybody's having a great summer, and before we know it, our first game's going to be here.
And we'll be back with another Ask the AD to answer more fan questions. But the short summation of this whole thing is we're going to be okay, right?
We're going to be fine. Big 12 is going to be fine, and we're going to be fine, and that's a good thing.
That's right. Gene, really appreciate the time. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Gene Taylor joining us here for Ask the AD. As always, keep those questions coming. You can keep them going on Twitter. You can reach out to Gene. You can reach out to me. We'll get them on for the next Ask the AD as well. For Preston Kerner, who produces and directs this whole deal, and for Gene Taylor, I'm Brian Smolder. Thank you for watching.